the scooter.
All right, guys. I get the illustrious honor for trying to follow up Vern Harnish over there. Tough act to follow. How's everybody? Welcome to this presentation. Tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Richie Neeson. I'm President and CEO of Atlantic Coast Consulting. We're in the Atlanta area. We're bemoaning the traffic in the Atlanta area earlier, but around the Atlanta area, I have a small civil engineering firm. We mainly do environmental engineering for the solid waste industry. And happy to come out here and share my presentation with you guys. Hope you guys are enjoying San Diego. The weather out here is amazing, isn't it?
Just like Michigan.
Just like Michigan, yeah.
For 3 days.
For 3 days in some period in March.
Yeah.
I think the easiest job in the entire world must be a weather forecaster in San Diego. It's a little bit cloudy in the morning, it burns off, it'll be 73 degrees. Tomorrow will be a little cloudy, burns off at 73 degrees. I can tell you this has been a lot better than my first trip to San Diego. My first trip to San Diego was when I came out here for boot camp with the Navy. That should work. Come on. Back up over here. Hang on 1 second. Try this one. This one works. One second. Well,
There's a laptop advance if you.
yeah, I'm gonna have to do it that way.
You want me to do it for you? Or?
Nah, I got it. So, first time I came out here was in the Navy for boot camp. I was, boot camp will make your break. I was 18 years old, barely out of high school, and they flew me from Savannah, Georgia, all the way to San Diego, California. I'd never been away from home before. That was traumatizing. Then I got this drill instructor yelling and screaming at me, calling me an idiot. That was traumatizing. Then they take me into this room and they sit me in this chair. This guy comes up behind me and shaves all my hair off. Believe it or not, that was traumatizing. It still hasn't grown back. My boot camp, my drill instructor at boot camp was a intimidating guy. He'd yell and scream at us all day long. I remember the first weekend at boot camp. You don't get weekends off in boot camp. They need 7 days a week to convince you you're an idiot. Well, Sunday, these guys out there doing drills and exercises, yelling and screaming at us. He gathers us around Sunday afternoon. He brings us all together. We're going to have this little kumbaya moment. And he starts telling us how boot camp's not going to be all that bad. And he starts telling us how great the real Navy was going to be once we got out of boot camp. Turns out it was a bunch of fake news. But he's having this little moment, and he says, does anybody have any questions? You can ask me anything. There are no stupid questions. I'm thinking, this is my opportunity. I'm feeling a little bit homesick, and I've got a burning question burning inside me. And a lot of you parents probably think that's great. He's missing his mom and dad. I was a teenage boy. I was missing my high school girlfriend. So I muster up all the courage I can. I said, excuse me, sir. When can we use the phone so we can call home? And he looks over at me and says, Neeson, I was wrong. That is a stupid question. My drill instructor saw that question as a sign of weakness. Today I'm here to tell you that questions aren't a sign of weakness. Questions can be a powerful tool we can use in our to improve our performance. Because if we use better questions, we get better solutions, and we can achieve better results. So today I want to talk about how we can use better questions. Why questions are important to us as leaders. I'm even going to give you a formula to come up with really good questions. And then we're going to talk about how we can use those questions and get creative problem-solving solutions, better solutions. And then we're going to pull it all together and talk about how we can use those to get better results. So let's just start with better questions. Did not walk over with me. Better questions. Does anybody know why questions are important to us as leaders? What's the one thing that our team needs us to do as leaders? They need us to make decisions. You ever work with somebody who couldn't make a decision? Remember how frustrating that is? They need us to make decisions. But the problem is, we can only make decisions if we have one thing. And that's information. We need information in order to make the decisions. The problem is we don't know what we don't know. We need to use questions to get our people to give us the information they have. The better we ask questions, the more information we can have. So the better the questions, the better the information, we can make better decisions. That's essentially why questions are important to us as leaders. So if we're going to use questions to get information so that we can make better decisions, we need to know what types of questions we need to be asking. What type of information do we get from different types of questions? By my estimation, there's 11 different types of questions. And we'll go through these really quickly. It won't take very long. But I'll go through each type of question and talk about the type of information we get from those questions. We'll start with can, is, are, do, and did. Can you go to the meeting? Are you ready for the meeting? Do we need to bring donuts to the meeting? Those are essentially yes or no questions. They don't give us a whole lot of information. They can help us a little bit, but they don't give us a whole lot of information we can use to make our decisions. So that's the yes or no questions. Now we get the reporters type of questions. When, where, and who. When's the meeting? Where's the meeting? Who's bringing donuts to the meeting? Those are great logistical questions. They give us some logistical information. We need to know where the meetings are going to be. We need to know where, when, and who's going to participate. But it doesn't help us solve any problems. It doesn't get us any closer to coming up with any solutions. Then we have why. Why questions are a category all to themselves because why questions are great for self-reflection. Why am I here today? Why do our clients need our services? Those can be great questions for you if you're using them for self-reflection, to figure out your purpose. But as leaders, when we're working in our teams, why questions can be very dangerous. Why questions can put people very on defense mode. I was talking to Dusty earlier today. I told you I was going to ask you a question, didn't I?
You did.
I'll give you a good example of why questions are bad.
Why didn't you tell me what question you were going to ask me?
Why did you decide to wear that shirt?
It's the only one I had.
That's the one I had. I wore this because it's the only one I had that didn't have any stains on it yet. But you see how that can put somebody in a very defensive mode? The only information I got from him was his justification for the decision that he's already made. It doesn't help me get a whole lot of good information. Put him in an awkward situation, probably put everybody else in an awkward situation to hear me ask that question. So why questions can be very dangerous. It'd be best if we could just eliminate why questions. Any of you have any kids? Try to go a week without asking your kids a why question. They get defensive too. Why did you do that? Puts them in a defensive mode. Better questions are what and how. Take that same question, why did you do that? And say, what could you have done differently? See how it changes the whole perception of the question? it gets them from this defensive mode into creative thinking mode. That's where we want our teams to be. If we're going to come up with really good solutions, if we're going to get really good information, we need to get them into thinking mode, not defensive mode. What and how questions are really good questions. So I told you I was going to give you a great formula for coming up with really good questions. You've been dying, you've been sitting on the edge of your seat trying to find it out. SOS. Your questions should be simple, or short versus long. The idea is to get somebody else talking to you and giving you the information they have. So if your question is longer than their answer, you've got it backwards. You need to get them talking. Your question should also be open, not closed. We need to be using more what and how questions than yes or no questions. Your question should also be simple, not complex. You shouldn't have to explain your question. You can have a very simple question that can have a very powerful response. So short, open, simple questions. That's what makes a better question. Vern Harnish, I jotted one down that he gave us earlier. He said, how can we make it easier? It's a very short, open-ended, simple question with a how. And it really gets you thinking about how you can do things differently. How can you make it easier? That's a great question. Sometimes, remember, I'm in a project meeting with a group, talking in group discussions, and somebody else hasn't provided much input. Just turn to them and say, what do you think? Gets them engaged, gets them going. That's how we come up with better questions. Now we're going to talk about using those questions to get better solutions. And I want to do an exercise with the group real quick. This is the audience participation portion of the presentation. We've all done brainstorming exercises, haven't we? Where you got a big problem and you start brainstorming solutions to see what works. I was reading an article the other day in Harvard Business Review by a guy named Hal Gregerson. And he wrote an article talking about better brainstorming. And his philosophy was, instead of brainstorming solutions, you brainstorm questions. Just throw out a bunch of questions. You got a same big problem, but you start throwing out questions instead of brainstorming solutions. A couple of ground rules. He says to do it for a short amount of time, because believe it or not, when you have a limited amount of time, your creativity increases. Remember when you were trying to write those papers the day before they were due? You can get very creative with writing those papers. So short amount of time increases creativity. The people who are participating don't all have to be experts. You want to get a big mix of people to participate, because you're not brainstorming solutions, you're brainstorming questions. Everybody's got questions. The participants don't need to explain their questions. You're just rapid fire throwing out questions, and during the exercise you're not going to try to answer the questions. You're just capturing the questions and getting the creative process going. So I want to do this exercise with us real quick. And to do this, I'll need one volunteer to help me write down all the questions. Can I get one volunteer? Anyone? Okay, please. Come on up.
Oh, I have to write on the board.
You have to write on the board. What's your name?
Amber,
Amber. Nice to meet you. Who are you with?
Rincon Consultants.
Rincon Consultants. What do you guys do?
We're an environmental consulting firm.
And what kind of environmental?
CEQA, NEPA, full service environmental. The only thing we don't do in-house is air quality and traffic.
Okay. Sounds like you're well overqualified for this job. This is going to be great. All you have to do is write down the questions.
All right.
I appreciate you volunteering.
No problem.
I volunteered once. I ended up out here in the Navy. That's why I learned the Navy is actually an acronym. It says, never again volunteer yourself. It's sure going to be great. It's going to be great. So for this scenario, let's pretend that I'm a landscaper out here in San Diego. The weather's perfect. It's year-round. It's gorgeous all the time. And I have a passion for landscaping, but I don't know how to grow my business. So I want you guys are my trusted advisors, and I want you guys to just brainstorm questions you have for me about growing my business. Now this is the time where we can practice those what and how questions in that simple, open, short format. Amber will appreciate you if you keep them short and simple. So, what questions do you have for a landscaper who's trying to grow a business?
How many employees might get
How many employees?
What's your target market?
What is our target market?
How much equipment?
How much equipment do we need, okay?
How do I reach high-end clients?
How do I reach the high-end clients? In other words, the high revenue clients.
How are you different?
There you go. How? How are we different?
Can't write that fast.
Yeah, she's doing a great job.
What kind of plants are available?
What kind of plants does this are available in this area? Okay. What else?
How are you going to price it?
How are we going to price it? Okay. What about marketing? Anybody have marketing questions?
Yeah, what have you already done for experience? I want to know what he's already done though for marketing.
Okay.
Or how do you get clients today?
Okay. How do you get existing clients? Okay. Just a few more. How about a few more?
What's your specialty?
What's our specialty? How are we different from other firms, right? Okay.
How far are you willing to travel?
How far are we willing to travel? Okay. That brings in resources and other offices and all that stuff, right? Okay. I think that's a good start. Thank you, Amber.
No problem. Luckily, I can read my writing, so if you don't know
That's
what
okay.
they say.
That's okay. We're not even going to try to answer these questions.
All
Thank
right.
you, Amber. Thanks for participating. And
You never know when
so
you're
here,
gonna
you
fall
get two
back.
things out of this exercise. You get a bunch of questions. And Richie, the landscaper, who's very excited about landscaping all of a sudden, I can dive into one or two of these questions and really make some headway about growing my business. Almost all of those are great questions that help me grow my business. But the other benefit of this exercise is this creative process, this creative energy. You know, we started out with a couple of questions, and there for a minute we had so many questions, Amber couldn't keep up. Because people over here were asking questions that prompted you guys to start asking some questions, and the more all these questions started creating all this energy. I want to explain to you why that works. When you hear somebody make a statement, the logical parts of your brain kick in. And you start trying to comprehend what's being said and analyze whether you believe it or not. In fact, it just happened when I made that statement. You can tell, because Dusty's over here looking at me like I'm crazy. But let me ask you something. What happens when you hear somebody ask a question? What was it?
Well, you think of another one.
You think of another one. You think of another. What happens is your brain goes into Google mode. Your brain, whenever you hear somebody ask a question, your brain automatically starts searching for the answer. Your brain starts getting into the creative problem-solving parts of your brain kick in, and you can't help yourself but trying to come up with an answer. When you hear a statement, you start analyzing it. When you hear a question, you automatically start searching for an answer. Whether it's right or not, you start searching for an answer. All that happens when you change the punctuation at the end of the sentence from a period to a question mark. It's amazing. How many of you guys have these weekly meetings with your team, or weekly or monthly meetings? It seems like you talk about the same stuff over and over again, nothing really gets done. I'm not the only one, am I? Right? We all have these meetings where we sit there and you go, oh, didn't we talk about this last month and nothing's changed? Part of the problem with some of these is that we have these meetings and we talk about them looking for answers. Maybe we should be talking about them and looking for questions, because the questions get that creative process going. We need to be using the period more and the question mark less. That's why you get that creative process going. Keep that creativity moving. So let's talk about how we can use those questions and solutions to come up with better results. I'll tell you a story about something that happened in my firm this year. We had a client, been working with them for a long time, and he had a closed landfill. I know there's a couple other folks that do environmental stuff, but he had a closed landfill. We were doing the methane monitoring for this landfill. For some reason, this particular landfill had the methane monitoring points right up at the edge of the landfill. Most people put them way out by the property line. But we started getting these methane exceedances in one area of the landfill. And methane's kind of funny. You can have an exceedance here and move 10, 20 feet over and there's no exceedance at all. So our project manager came up with a simple, cost-effective solution. He was going to move the methane monitoring point from here to there. Very realistic, very reasonable, simple and cost-effective. That's usually what the client wants, isn't it? Well, this client, in this instance, wanted something completely different. He wanted complex and expensive, if you can imagine that. He wanted to reduce the amount of gas inside the landfill. And I'll tell you a little bit about the personalities I was dealing with. Our client can be a little hard-headed. Anybody have any of those? And he doesn't communicate things very diplomatically. If you're ever in a meeting with him and it's not going his way, he can be a little bit harsh. And our project manager, he's got a lot of, he's pride in his professional work. He doesn't, takes a lot of pride in what he does. And he can be a little hard-headed. Anybody have those on the project manager side as well? When you get two hard-headed people working together on the same solution, it's unstoppable. Unfortunately, that's not what I had here. These guys are button heads. So we get our project team together in the conference room and we start talking about how we can come up with a solution to what the client wants. Problem is, if we're going to go get a solution, we need our project manager involved because he's the methane guy. It's probably a joke there, but I'll let that just linger. He's the methane guy. So, but he's stuck in hardhead mode. He thinks the client is completely crazy for wanting a complex, expensive solution for such a simple problem. So we're getting nowhere until somebody in the room says, well, if we had to reduce the methane in this area, how would we do it? It's one of those how questions. Short, open-ended, simple. They got our project manager thinking. They got him into that creative mode. He says, well, we could put some vents and relieve some of the pressure. Or we could put some pumps in there to literally suck the gas out of the landfill. But the more he started answering that simple how question, the more he started coming up with a solution. And the more he started explaining those solutions, the more he started to believe that it could be done. He took ownership of it and ultimately delivered exactly what the client wanted. That's the power of questions. You can use those questions to get people to take ownership. If you want to achieve better results, people on your team have to have ownership of the solution. And I'm not talking about the type of ownership you have with your firms and your shareholders and all that stuff. You don't have to be shareholders. I'm talking about the type of ownership you get when you care about something. If you don't think ownership's important, let me ask you, when's the last time you washed a rental car? Ownership is very important. I'll give you another example. My son, Sam, he's in high school. And last year he was struggling with his high school algebra class. We other engineers we have. Handful, I'm an engineer. And I'll tell you, as an engineer, I was a little bit conflicted when I found out he was struggling with his algebra class. As a parent, I was a little bit disappointed that he was struggling. As an engineer, I was excited because I could finally help him with his schoolwork. So I started talking to him about what's going on with his his algebra class, and he starts explaining to me. I said, well, you know, Sam, I'm an engineer. I went to Georgia Tech. In fact, I even graduated from Georgia Tech, believe it or not. And I said, I can help you with your algebra class. And he looks up, without hesitation, he says, Dad, it's advanced math. This little sucker, are you kidding me? I said, Sam, when I was at Georgia Tech, I took 5 calculuses and differential equations. I think I can handle your high school algebra class. So he goes upstairs to get his book. And he comes back downstairs and says, so what are you having trouble with? He says, multiplying polynomials. I don't remember that term. I'm not really sure, but I'm sure that when I see it, it'll come to me. I'll know how to do it. I was wrong. Where's the equal sign? Remember whatever you did on one side of the equal sign, you had to do the opposite on the other side of the equal sign, then you move everything over to solve the unknown variable? Where's all that? How am I supposed to solve this problem? The problem is, I can't let him know I don't know what I'm doing at this point. So I did what any reasonable parent would do. I looked in the back of the book. Remember when you were in school, they had the odd number problems in the back of the book? I figured once I see the solution, I'll know how to figure it out. I was wrong again. I still had no clue. I still couldn't let him know that. So I started asking him a series of these SOS questions. I said, what do you think is the first step? He started explaining to me. So what are you going to do with this other variable? And just like our project manager, the more he started explaining to me, the more confident he got, the more he took ownership of it. I kept going on with these questions. I said, what's the next step? What are we going to do here? Ultimately, he solved the problem himself. I know this because of the answers in the back of the book. He got so excited, he goes, oh, Dad, let's move on to problem number 2. I said, let's stick with the odd number problems. When you are in a position of authority, you can tell somebody what the solution is, you can tell them what they're doing wrong, and they might kind of, sort of, eventually do it. But if you use questions to get them to come up with their own solution, they'll embrace it, and they'll work twice as hard to implement it. That's how you use questions to get people to take ownership of what they're doing. And when you do that, it really works. Use this at home. Use this at work. Use this with employee evaluations. If you use questions to get people to come up with their own solutions, they'll embrace it. They'll work twice as hard to implement it because it'll be their solution. They'll have ownership. That's how you can use better questions to get better solutions and to deliver better results. I've got one last thing I want to leave you with, but I can't do a presentation on questions without seeing what questions you have. So what questions do you have?
What grade did your son get?
Better than what it would have been if I gave it to him. He's doing well. He's doing well. He survived his class.
I think your concept, it makes all the sense in the world. And one thing I didn't hear you say is bring that to when we're talking to our customers versus internal, because we're all technical.
Yeah.
And as soon as we hear that question, we want to go straight to the answer. I can solve your problem. I know the answer right now. And the idea is step back and ask them some more questions so you better understand it, but don't give them the answer until you get the sale.
I got some of the guts of this presentation I got out of reading a negotiating book. It's a really good negotiating book. It's called Never Split the Difference. And it's by the FBI's lead negotiator. And it was really good. He called it Never Split the Difference because if a hostage has a kidnapper's got 2 hostages, what are you going to do? Say, I'll take one, you take one? So but he talked about how he used questions, just like you said, use questions and then wait and listen, and let them give you all the information. The more information you get from your clients, the more you can draft your proposal to address it, draft your whole project strategy to deliver exactly what they want, but you got to ask those questions to know what they want. Very good point. One of the, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about Sam Walton. We know about Walmart being this big conglomerate, huge, successful conglomerate. But they said when Sam Walton started Walmart, it was obviously a struggling retail store, and he used to use questions all the time. He'd go around and ask everybody questions. All of his employees, he'd ask them questions about what's working, what's not working. He'd ask his customers, what do you want to see more of? What do you want to see less of? And how can we better serve you? He would even go into his competitors' stores and pump them up a little bit, talk about how great their store is, and then he'd ask them questions about what they're doing, what kind of things that they're seeing in the industry. He would use all that stuff to come back and improve Walmart to what it is today. Yes, sir.
We feel that the quality of your question is better if you demonstrate a strategy of critical thinking or empathy. So putting yourself in your audience's shoes, do you have any strategies for critical thinking or empathy that improve the quality of your question?
The biggest part of that is when you ask a question, care about the answer. Ask a question that you care about. You don't really have to frame it in their perspective, but if they feel like you care about it and you're really going to listen to it, that's the biggest thing you can do, is make them know that you care about the answer. That builds that trust.
Is there a difference between written versus verbal questions? So maybe in the context of like a client survey or employee survey, written versus spoken questions?
I'm not an expert on doing surveys. I know Client Savvy does a lot with surveys, and drafting surveys I think are different because you're trying to get different information. Mine is mostly interpersonal with one-on-one. Even it's more effective in person, but over the phone if you can do it that way. But to me, I think these questions are better. You get better information when you get that one-on-one. Yes, Amber?
Any strategies to break the ice? I ask questions all the time and everybody stares at me and nobody wants to speak up.
I think if you ask questions, I'm trying to teach this to my son because he's not very outgoing, but I keep telling him that people will think you're the best conversationalist in the world if you start asking questions about them. Where are you from, Andy? And things like that. You start asking questions about somebody else and then give them softball questions so they can start giving you information. And once they start giving you that information, it's hard to stop. And all you're doing is asking them questions. They come away and thinking he talked my ear off. No, I just asked you a couple of questions and you talked my ear off. That's the best strategy, I think.
One of the things that I've read or heard somewhere sort of related to that is, especially in a group environment, if you ask a question of a group and maybe like you did, for example, a few moments ago, right? Does anyone have any questions? Letting there be time for that awkward pause.
Yeah.
And for you as the question asker, don't jump in there to fill the space. Like, let it linger.
Yeah.
And eventually someone's just going to, they can't take it anymore. They're going to start asking questions.
Yeah.
What's really on their mind, yeah.
Most people
Okay.
hate that awkward silence after the question, but if you ask the question and let them think about it. I asked a client the other day, we're in the middle of something, and we're outside of work environment, and I said, how would you describe our company to your peers, to other people in your industry? And he said, and it stumped him a little bit, and he says, let me think about that. I said, take all the time you want. I really want to know the answer to that question, so take all the time you want. I'll come back to you in 20, 30 minutes. And he came back to me, he had a great response. It's really going to help us improve our performance, for sure. I got a question for you guys. How do you think you can implement some of this back in your real world environment?
Just by sharing at the next meeting what we just talked about.
Yeah. One of the things I do in meetings is I write what and how at the top of the agenda to remind me to ask what and how questions throughout the meeting. Keep people in that creative mode. It's hard to build that habit, so if you get little keys like that, it helps you ask those questions, keeps them moving. A lot of us are afraid to ask questions, but when we're kids aren't afraid to ask questions. This is my daughter Hadley. Hadley used to wear me out with questions. One day she comes up to me and says, "Dad, where do people come from?" She's a little bit too young, and I didn't want to get into all the birds and the bees and all those details. So I said, well, Adam and Eve had babies, and their babies had babies, and so on and so on. That's where people come from. Then she runs right over to Mom and asks the same question. Because that's what they do. They ask the same questions over and over again. She says, "Mom, where do people come from?" Mom took a different approach. She says, "Well, scientists say that people evolved from monkeys, and that's where people came from." Well, Hadley runs right back over to me. She says, "Dad, you lied." I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "You told me that people came from Adam and Eve." Well, Mom just told me that people came from monkeys, or we evolved from monkeys. It's not going to explain, huh? She was talking about her side of the family. Kids ask a lot of crazy questions. Research says that kids ask 100 to 200 questions a day. But as we get older, we ask fewer and fewer questions. A lot of times us as leaders feel like we can't ask questions because we are supposed to have all the answers. But I hope you learned today that you can use questions to improve your performance. Use better questions. What and how questions in the short, open-ended, simple format. Give people into creative thinking mode. Give you the information you need to make good decisions. Then you can use those better questions to get better solutions. Remember, when you use the question mark more and the period less, people are in creative mode instead of analyzing what you just said. Get them in creative problem-solving mode. That's how you come up with better solutions. Try that brainstorming exercise when you have an issue in those meetings that we just talked about where things have stalled. Use a brainstorming exercise. What questions do we have? I guarantee you the creativity will increase, and you'll come up with one or two of those questions that you can solve and you can dive into a little bit. Then if you use both of those, you can get your team, you can use those questions to get your team to come up with their own solutions. And that's how you get them to take ownership and really deliver those solutions. They'll work twice as hard to implement those solutions because they'll be their own solution. They'll have ownership of it. My drill instructor, when I was back out here in the Navy, he thought my question was a stupid question. And I'll admit, my timing wasn't very good. But he also saw that question as a sign of weakness. And if you don't remember anything else from this presentation, remember this. The best leaders don't have all the answers. The best leaders have the best questions.